She mocked the Black Waitress, until her millionaire husband exposed the truth. It happened in a crowded hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, silk dresses, and whispered judgment. Among the laughter, a woman in an expensive gown tore another woman's dress apart, sneering as fabric and dignity fell to the floor. She thought she was punishing a waitress who didn't belong among the wealthy. But she never imagined the eyes watching from across the room, the man whose truth would turn her world upside down, because the woman she humiliated wasn't who she thought she was. And when the truth surfaced, so did every hidden face of her own cruelty. Before the chaos of that night, Maya lived a quiet rhythm most people never noticed. She was a hotel server, one of dozens moving unseen through halls lined with wealth. Her mornings began before dawn, pressing a simple uniform, pinning her hair, whispering promises to herself that hard work would open doors one day. Each step through the lobby reminded her where she stood, serving the very people who never saw her beyond the tray she carried. Maya was calm, composed, the kind who believed grace was its own kind of power. She smiled even when the whispers cut deep, when guests ignored her "good morning" or spoke to her like she was furniture. She didn't fight it. She endured, holding her dignity like something sacred. Her coworkers admired her for that quiet strength, though few knew what it cost her to maintain it. That evening, the hotel hosted one of its grandest charity galas of the year. The city's elite arrived in polished cars, wrapped in designer fabric and perfume. To them, the event was about glamour. To Maya, it was survival, a long shift that could mean enough overtime to pay her mother's medical bills. She ironed every crease from her uniform, straightened her posture, and entered the ballroom under a glow of chandeliers that seemed to mock her plainness. As she moved through the crowd with practiced poise, Maya's attention drifted to the laughter, the luxury, the life she could never touch. But she didn't resent it. She'd learned long ago that envy poisons the soul faster than hunger. What she didn't know was that someone in that room, the woman in the scarlet gown, had already decided what she was worth before hearing her name. To the guests, Maya was invisible, but to that woman she was a threat, proof that elegance could exist without privilege, that dignity could come without wealth. And that realization, though silent, would soon ignite something cruel. The kind of cruelty born from insecurity, wrapped in arrogance and sharpened by racism. As music filled the room and champagne glasses clinked, Maya carried on, unaware that her life was about to be pulled apart, not by accident, but by intention. The night would not end with applause or tips. It would end with humiliation, a torn dress, and the sudden piercing truth that some people's power depends on others' pain. The night unfolded like a performance, every movement timed, every gesture rehearsed. Maya glided between tables, balancing trays of crystal glasses that caught the ballroom light like scattered stars. Music swelled, laughter rose, and for a while she blended into the rhythm of it all, unseen, unbothered, efficient. But beneath the surface, the air carried something sharper. It began with glances, small, cutting looks from a group of women near the center table. They whispered behind manicured hands, their smiles tight, eyes darting toward Maya whenever she passed. She'd seen it before, pity mixed with mockery. But this time there was something else. Recognition. At the head of the table sat Evelyn Harrow, the kind of woman who measured her worth in diamonds and disdain. Married to a real estate mogul known for his charm and quiet generosity, Evelyn was a socialite, addicted to power. Every detail of her life, from her dress to her guests, existed to prove one thing: she belonged above everyone else. When Maya approached her table with a tray of champagne, Evelyn's eyes lingered too long. Her expression, calculated, almost amused, made Maya hesitate. Still, she smiled politely, setting down the glasses with practiced precision. Evelyn tilted her head. "You look familiar," she said under her breath, loud enough for the women beside her to hear. Maya nodded, unsure how to respond. "I don't think so, ma'am." Evelyn's smirk deepened. "No, I remember now. You were at that fundraiser last year, weren't you? The one serving hors d'oeuvres near the bar." She laughed softly, the sound cutting through the air like glass. "You were so nervous you nearly dropped a tray. It's nice to see you've improved." A few guests chuckled. Maya lowered her eyes, murmuring a polite, "Thank you," and stepped back. The laughter followed her like a shadow. Her chest tightened, but she kept moving. Years of experience had taught her that composure was her only defense. But as the night went on, Evelyn's gaze kept finding her. Later, near midnight, Maya passed by again to refill the wine glasses. Evelyn reached out suddenly, stopping her mid-step. "Wait," she said, tugging lightly at the edge of Maya's sleeve. "That fabric, how strange. Isn't this the same design I saw at the boutique downtown?" The room quieted slightly, enough for a few heads to turn. Maya froze. Her uniform was simple, black and pressed, but beneath it she wore her own handmade dress, an elegant design she had sewn herself from leftover fabric. She'd worn it discreetly, hoping it might remind her she was more than the uniform that confined her. Evelyn smiled, a predator scenting weakness. "How interesting. I suppose even the help likes to pretend sometimes." Her tone was sugar-coated cruelty. A few of her friends laughed quietly, eyes glinting with approval. Maya tried to speak. "Ma'am, this is just something I made." But Evelyn interrupted, leaning forward. "Made? Oh, how adorable. You sew now?" It was mockery wrapped in disbelief. Maya's throat tightened. She nodded once, her voice calm but trembling. "Yes, I make clothes in my free time." Evelyn's laugh cut her off again. "Free time? I didn't know the hotel let staff play dress-up. Tell me, do you also design for guests now?" The table erupted in laughter. Maya's hands shook, the tray nearly slipping from her grasp. Heat rose in her chest, but she swallowed it. She turned to leave, determined to maintain what little dignity she had left. But Evelyn wasn't finished. "Wait," she said again, louder this time. "Let's see this creation of yours properly." Before Maya could step back, Evelyn reached forward, grabbing the thin fabric near Maya's shoulder and pulling hard. The sound of tearing cloth echoed across the ballroom. Conversations halted. Music faltered. Time fractured. Maya stumbled, clutching at the ripped seam, her heart pounding against her ribs. The laughter died abruptly as silence spread, heavy and suffocating. Dozens of faces turned toward her, the waitress standing exposed in a room built to humiliate her. Evelyn blinked, suddenly aware of the attention. Her tone shifted, falsely innocent. "Oh my, it ripped so easily." Perhaps it wasn't very well made. Maya's breath hitched. She wanted to vanish, to sink beneath the marble floor. But she stood frozen, every nerve screaming with shame. Somewhere in the distance, a voice demanded to know what was happening. Evelyn waved a dismissive hand. "Nothing serious. The staff can be so dramatic." The hotel manager rushed over, face pale, whispering apologies. Maya stepped back, refusing to cry. She wouldn't give Evelyn that satisfaction. But inside, something cracked. The quiet faith she'd always carried that dignity could shield her from cruelty. Then came the sound that changed everything. A calm, deliberate voice cutting through the crowd. "Evelyn!" The guests turned. From the far side of the room, a tall man approached. Impeccably dressed, his expression unreadable. Evelyn's smile faltered. It was her husband. He walked toward the scene slowly, his eyes shifting from his wife to Maya. The silence thickened. Maya didn't know him personally, but she recognized him instantly. The hotel's largest investor, the man whose name adorned the event program. He stopped in front of Evelyn, the weight of his gaze forcing her to step back. "What exactly are you doing?" he asked softly. Each word heavy with restrained fury. Evelyn stammered. She was wearing something inappropriate. "I was just—" He raised a hand, silencing her. "Enough." His eyes turned to Maya, steady, kind, unflinching. "Are you all right?" She nodded faintly, unable to speak. The crowd waited, the tension electric. Then his gaze shifted again, to the torn dress, to the horror written across every onlooker's face. Something hardened in him, a quiet anger that chilled the room more than shouting ever could. He looked back at Evelyn. "Do you know who she is?" Confusion flickered across Evelyn's face. "She's a waitress, one of the staff, obviously." The man exhaled slowly. "No, she's the designer who made the line that launched my company's new fashion division." Gasps rippled through the guests. Evelyn's face drained of color. He continued, voice calm but razor-sharp. "We commissioned her months ago under an independent contract. Her designs outsold every established name in the catalog, and tonight she was here quietly working, because she didn't want her background to define how she was treated. The words sliced through the silence. Evelyn's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her friends looked away, faces burning with shame. Maya stood motionless, her breath catching between disbelief and vindication. Every humiliation she'd swallowed, every silent endurance, it all converged in that moment of revelation. But it wasn't triumph that filled her. It was grief, for every unseen person who would never have someone step in for them, for every wound buried under polite smiles. The man turned once more to the crowd. This is what prejudice looks like when it wears pearls and smiles for cameras. His tone was quiet, but the message rang louder than any outburst, and though no one dared to speak, the silence itself became a mirror, showing everyone exactly who they were. As the staff escorted Evelyn away, Maya stood there, still clutching the torn edge of her dress. Her hands trembled, but her eyes no longer looked down. The night wasn't over, but the balance had shifted. Dignity had finally found its voice, and it spoke through the quiet strength of the woman they had tried to erase. The ballroom had gone quiet, but silence was never neutral. It carried judgment, guilt, and the weight of realization. Maya stood frozen in that silence, surrounded by the wreckage of her dignity and the gaze of dozens who had seen everything. The torn dress clung awkwardly to her shoulder, one side ripped open like a wound that refused to close. And still she didn't cry. She couldn't. The humiliation was too deep for tears. It was the kind that hollowed out the soul and left only silence behind. Evelyn stood a few feet away, pale and trembling, her mask of superiority finally cracking. She had spent years commanding every room she entered, but tonight, control had slipped through her manicured fingers. The husband she thought would defend her now looked at her like a stranger. Every word he had said hung in the air, echoing louder than the music that no longer played. Maya's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. She wanted to run, to disappear into the back corridors and never look back. But somewhere inside, another voice spoke. A small, quiet strength she'd buried long ago beneath the layers of endurance. Stand still. It wasn't defiance. It was reclamation. Security approached, unsure whom to help. The manager hovered near Maya, whispering that she could go home, that they'd handle it, but she didn't move. For the first time in her life, she refused to walk away from what had been done to her. The crowd remained still, suspended between guilt and discomfort. Some of the women who had laughed earlier now turned their faces away. Their smiles had vanished, replaced by something they couldn't name. Shame, maybe, or recognition. The husband, Daniel Harrow, took a slow step forward. His voice, calm but sharp, filled the air again. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked his wife. Evelyn's lips quivered. "Daniel, it was a misunderstanding." "No," he interrupted. "It wasn't." His tone carried a quiet finality that silenced even the whispers in the back of the room. "You saw a woman of color, wearing something beautiful, and you decided it didn't belong to her." The words struck like a gavel, each one hammering against the marble floor. Maya lowered her gaze, not out of shame, but because the weight of truth was too heavy to meet. The truth wasn't just about Evelyn. It was about the whole room, every person who had ever looked through her. Every moment her humanity had been discounted because of the color of her skin. Daniel turned to Maya. "You don't have to stay here another second," he said softly. "But if you choose to, know that you have nothing to be ashamed of." Maya nodded faintly, still trembling. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. Then something unexpected happened. From the far end of the room, one of the hotel's older staff members, a quiet man who'd worked there for decades, stepped forward. "She's not fine," he said, voice breaking the tension like glass. "None of us ever are. We see it every day." The room turned toward him. His voice shook but didn't falter. "We clean their tables, carry their coats, bow and smile while they look past us. Tonight they just went too far, but it's always there. Always." The confession hung in the air like thunder before rain. It wasn't just Maya's humiliation anymore. It was the unveiling of something far deeper, uglier, and older than the evening itself. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then tonight is where it ends," he said, his voice low but resolute. He turned to the guests. If you want to stand for something, start by looking at her, really seeing her. No one moved. For the first time, the people who had built their comfort on silence found themselves exposed. Evelyn tried to speak again, desperate to reclaim her composure. "Daniel, please, this isn't fair." He turned to her, eyes cold. "Fair?" He gestured toward Maya. Fair would have been treating her like a person. Fair would have been not tearing the clothes off a woman because you assumed she didn't deserve them. The word assumed hit harder than any shout. It was the mirror none of them wanted to face. The tension broke when Maya finally spoke. Her voice was soft but unwavering. "It's not just the dress," she said, her gaze fixed on Evelyn. "You didn't tear fabric, you tore respect. And you did it because you thought you could." No one breathed. The words, simple yet devastating, sliced through the air with precision. Maya wasn't pleading for sympathy. She was reclaiming truth. Evelyn's composure collapsed entirely. Her lip trembled, her eyes darting toward the exits. The image of control, beauty, and grace she had curated for years now crumbled under the weight of her own prejudice. "I didn't mean," she began, but even she couldn't finish the lie. Daniel exhaled, his voice quiet. "Yes, you did." The lights above flickered slightly, their shimmer reflecting off the crystal chandeliers as if the room itself couldn't bear witness to what it had become. The atmosphere had shifted from indulgence to reckoning. Maya straightened her posture. Though her dress was torn, she somehow looked taller, more complete than anyone else in the room. She turned to the crowd, her eyes steady. "This is what happens when kindness is mistaken for weakness," she said. "And when silence lets cruelty become tradition." Then, without another word, she walked toward the exit. The staff stepped aside, heads bowed in quiet reverence. No one dared stop her, even Evelyn, who had always believed the world revolved around her, could only watch in paralyzed silence as the woman she'd tried to humiliate walked away with every ounce of power she thought she'd destroyed. The door closed softly behind Maya, but the silence that followed wasn't peace, it was aftermath. Daniel looked around the room, his expression unreadable. Then he removed his wedding ring, setting it on the nearest table. The metallic sound of it hitting the surface cut through the still air. "I won't share my name with hate," he said simply. Evelyn's knees weakened, her body swaying as if the floor beneath her had disappeared. The audience, guests, staff, musicians, all stood in stunned quiet. The event, meant to celebrate charity and compassion, had turned into an unmasking of its own hypocrisy. Outside, Maya stepped into the night air. The city lights glimmered off the wet pavement, and for the first time in years she felt the air fill her lungs completely. The noise of the gala was distant now, fading behind her like a bad dream. Each step she took was heavy but freeing, like shedding years of invisible chains. In the reflection of the glass doors, she caught a glimpse of herself, disheveled, trembling, but alive. The torn dress no longer looked like a symbol of shame. It looked like proof. Proof that she had survived what was meant to break her. Behind her, chaos brewed inside the ballroom. Some guests began to leave quietly, their heads bowed in guilt. Others argued in hushed tones, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But none of it mattered anymore. The illusion had shattered. Maya didn't look back. The sound of the city, cars, wind, distant music, wrapped around her like a new rhythm, one she could finally move to on her own terms. For the first time, she realized that power didn't come from status, wealth, or approval. It came from the choice to stand when everything around you tried to make you small. And as she walked toward the darkened street, one question lingered, unspoken, unanswered, but alive in the mind of every witness that night. When the masks of civility fall, what kind of person are you really left being? In the weeks that followed, the story spread far beyond the walls of that hotel ballroom. What began as a private act of humiliation became a public reckoning. Guests who had stood frozen that night suddenly found their silence echoing online, as the hotel security footage leaked, capturing every cruel detail of the moment Evelyn Harrow tore the dress from a black woman she thought beneath her. The internet did what the crowd would not. It watched, judged, and remembered. Headlines turned the incident into a mirror of society's hidden truths. Some tried to defend Evelyn, claiming it was a misunderstanding, but the images spoke for themselves. No misunderstanding could explain the satisfaction on her face, or the quiet pain in Maya's eyes. For Maya, the aftermath was strange. Strangers called her brave, others called her a victim, but she rejected both labels. She wasn't brave, she was tired. Tired of pretending that politeness could heal what cruelty kept breaking. Tired of holding her head high while others looked down on her. The night had forced her to see what she'd always known but never said aloud. That silence only protects the ones who cause the pain. When Daniel Harrow publicly announced his separation from Evelyn, he also did something no one expected. He revealed Maya's identity, not as a server, but as the independent designer behind the fashion line that had reshaped his company's success. Within days, her name filled industry headlines. The same world that once overlooked her now wanted to claim her, praise her, interview her. But Maya didn't rush to answer. Fame had never been her pursuit. Dignity had. She accepted one interview. A short, quiet conversation where she said only what mattered. They didn't tear my dress. They tore a truth people pretend not to see. You can sew fabric back together, but not respect once it's ripped away. Her words became a quote, printed and shared across thousands of posts. Yet for Maya, the noise of it all was secondary. What stayed with her wasn't the exposure or opportunity. It was the memory of that silence in the ballroom, the stillness when every mask of civility fell, and everyone saw what power really looked like when used to demean. She returned to her work, not out of resignation, but renewal. Each garment she made carried pieces of that night, not as pain, but as proof. She began a small foundation that trained young Black and minority women in design, business, and self-advocacy. Her studio walls displayed the torn piece of fabric from that night, framed, not to remember what was lost, but what was reclaimed. Evelyn vanished from public life. The same friends who once orbited her drifted away, unwilling to face the reflection she left behind. And while her name faded, the lessons she embodied did not. Because Evelyn was never just one woman. She was the shape that prejudice takes when privilege goes unchecked, when empathy is replaced by assumption, when humanity is divided by the illusion of class and color. The story of Maya and Evelyn became more than gossip. It became a mirror for the world watching. It exposed how racism often hides behind politeness, how cruelty can masquerade as sophistication, and how silence from bystanders builds the stage for injustice to perform freely. In the end, Maya didn't need revenge. She needed the world to see what she had always lived. And in showing it, she forced everyone else to confront a question that can't be ignored. How many times have we witnessed something wrong and convinced ourselves it wasn't our place to intervene? The dress could be mended. The wound it revealed could not. It was deeper than fabric, stitched into the very fabric of society. Because racism doesn't always scream in slurs or violence. Sometimes it whispers through laughter at a gala. Sometimes it hides behind charity and etiquette. Sometimes it tears. Not what we wear, but what we believe about who deserves to be seen, respected and heard. So as the story faded from headlines but remained etched in memory, one truth lingered. Silence is never neutral. Watching is not enough. Because when you see injustice and do nothing, whose side are you really on?